Testing. What's up? I'm Jacob Litzo, your Elixir Mentor, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Elixir Mentor Podcast. This is where we discuss everything related to Elixir, from interviews with enthusiasts, pioneers in the community, to innovative projects and libraries shaping Elixir's future. So let's jump right in. Today, I'm excited to welcome back Andrew Stewart. He's a talented Elixir dev who loves LiveView and front-end development. And if you haven't yet, definitely subscribe and check out his YouTube channel, SRC RIP, and that link is in the description below. Andrew, it's awesome to have you back. You want to just do a quick introduction of yourself if people don't know you?
Yeah, definitely. I kind of came into Elixir through Ruby, like a lot of people. I worked at a whole bunch of Ruby companies, and one of them had some Phoenix stuff, and I picked it up there, and then I was just like, I don't want to do Ruby anymore. So that's what I switched to. But I also always really liked doing front-end stuff too. And so I always kind of like taking on that challenge of trying to do front-end tasks as well. And I think I'm pretty good at it now. I don't know about when maybe 5 years ago, but I think now I'm pretty good at both front-end and back-end. So that's one of the things I like about Phoenix a lot, and especially LiveView. You can really realistically build really complex things all on your own, as long as you have the background and a little bit of design sense. LiveView lets you step over so much complexity of things that you would otherwise need, React to do or something like that. So I think it's really powerful for solo dev stuff, or just if you are someone that likes to do fully end-to-end, full stack kind of things. So that's what got me really interested in it.
Yeah, Andrew and I are opposites. His love for the front end, and I didn't start trying to even function in the front end until LiveView.
Yeah. It can be a love-hate relationship, I guess. There's a lot to dislike about JavaScript, and I understand why there's kind of this movement to get away from it and have as little as possible. And in that respect, I agree. You should try to have as little as possible. But the problem is, it doesn't mean that you can't. You still need to be good at it. Like, you can maybe eliminate 90% of things that you need JavaScript for, but that 10% of things is still there, and it's still challenging. So you still need to be really good at it to know how to solve those problems.
For sure. Well, and at least I think I'm going to learn a lot in this conversation, because we're talking about JavaScript and using it in, Phoenix LiveView projects. And for me, it pretty much stops at JavaScript hooks. So I use I'll write, animation scripts and, some JS hooks, and that's as much as I really use JavaScript for. So I'm excited to pick your brain and talk about a little more.
Yeah, definitely.
So there are when we're talking about JavaScript, everyone is probably familiar with JS hooks, especially if you follow my videos, and I'm sure you've touched on them as well. And if you want to be a better front-end developer, watch Andrew's videos because I'm just hacking my way through. But I know that there's 3 ways to interact, correct?
Yeah, I've been working on some educational content, and I haven't really seen it broken down this way before, but this is a way that I've kind of started to come to think about it in 3 ways of interoperability. One being client to server, one being server to client, and the last being client to client is kind of how you can think about it. Although it's not presented in that way in the docs, but I can kind of dig into my theory behind that if you want.
I'm just curious, what you even mean by client to client.
So basically, that's just referring to the JS commands. I think that's how they're referred to, which are those things where when you've got like Phoenix click and then JS dot push navigator, JS dot exec or whatever, that it looks like Elixir, but it actually turns into like a JavaScript command that will run when that event fires. So it allows you to put stuff in there that you write in Elixir, but it fires totally in JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
Like adding classes, toggle class, that whole thing there.
Okay.
That's all the commands.
Yeah, I feel like I've used those only for small animations. Is there anything else you'd use them for? Do you have any like good examples?
Well, there's a whole bunch of like helper function kind of things. There's add class, which is pretty obvious. There's one for focusing elements. There's a couple for focusing. There's remove attribute, remove class, set attribute.
Okay.
All those are, pretty self-explanatory what they do and when you would use them. Then there's a series of navigation ones. There's one for navigate and one for patch. And then there is kind of the primitive options that let you compose more custom functionality. That's not just one of these helper things like adding a class.
Mm-hmm.
The two main ones, and I think those are the only ones, but maybe I'm missing one. But the two main ones are exec, Phoenix LiveView.js exec, and dispatch. And they do slightly different things, but they allow you to build, custom behavior that's going to stay client side. So dispatch is what you would use when you want to emit an actual JavaScript event. Those are the things that you would create handlers for by doing window dot add event handler or add event listener. You can use one of the existing ones. Obviously there's like click and blur and all those, and maybe you need to do something with that, and that could be helpful. But you can also just make your own. If you need something to happen, you can make a custom JavaScript event and you can dispatch it with js.dispatch. So occasionally that can be useful, primarily when you have something like clicking on a button that you want to trigger some other thing to happen in JavaScript. That could be helpful. But say you don't, if you're using a hook, you already have JavaScript there, so you could just write it all in JavaScript and not use the commands, because the commands are really like helpers. They're not doing anything that you couldn't already do with just JavaScript. Mm-hmm. They allow you to do certain things without having to ever write any JavaScript.
Well, it sounds like it makes your life a lot easier.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, because a lot of what you're going to be doing is adding classes and removing classes and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and
I'm
that's
sitting
something
here.
That obviously.
Oh, sorry, man. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was sitting here thinking about like all the hooks that I just like jam into my app.js file. And I feel like leveraging this, you could keep things a little cleaner and just call specific functions using them then.
Exactly. Yeah, it can be useful for that. And then the other big one is exec, which that one is a little bit more kind of it's a little bit more complicated because that's the one that lets you execute another JS command that is defined in a attribute. So if you look at the generators in a new Phoenix project, what you get, and you look at like the modal component, there's like an open command in there, and it points at an attribute that's called like data open or whatever. And the command is in there, and then multiple different things just point at it. So that's what exec is used for. It means you can define the command in one place and just point multiple things at it, because ultimately they get serialized into the HTML.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so that is what I think of as like client to client communication. It's really just a helper to avoid having to write JavaScript, but it's pretty helpful. I mean, you can do quite a bit with that.
Yeah, and like when you say client to client, you're just kind of keeping all the work client side.
Yes, exactly. Like if you look at a lot of maybe it's not fair to say a lot, but there's some like LiveView content out there, or tutorials or guides or whatever, that sometimes you'll see demonstrating doing things like fully server side in a way that ends up feeling really bad to use. Like if you have, say, a modal or a dropdown or something like that, and you have a variable on the socket that defines whether it's open or not. If you have to rely on like a full network trip for it to open up, it just feels awful. Like it'll feel okay at first when you're working on it, but once you try it on the real internet, it's bad.
I was going to say, yeah, everything is so fast and responsive local host, right? And then the second you put it up on a server, which it could still be fast for you depending where the server is, but then take someone across the world and it's going to suck. That's kind of when user experience plummets, right?
That's the problem. Yeah, so that's where you really want to use the JS commands. You always want to be asking yourself, like, especially when you're looking at like opening or closing things, opening modals, closing modals, that can almost always be done totally client side, and you really want to try to do that if you can.
Right. And I feel like a lot of tutorials, they'll always use event handlers, right? And sure, it works great, local host, like we were saying, but the second you have slow internet connection or anything, your app's going to feel broken, and you'll probably start getting that, unable to connect toast popping up.
Yeah. The other thing I'll point out too, going back to dispatch, that one is a sleeper hit. I think it's got a lot of uses that aren't immediately obvious. One that really comes into play is if you want to trigger one of the non-custom JavaScript events that's going to do something else in your app. A big one is triggering like the change of a form. That emits an event, and you can trigger that. And that's really helpful if you have some JavaScript that changes like the state of the form or whatever, and then you want to trigger a change. That will make sure that LiveView gets an event as if the user just typed in the form with that new data. So if you look at like, there's a popular fly.io article about doing drag and drop. And I believe it makes use of that, where when you finish dragging the element, it triggers change, and then that goes and updates the form.
Versus doing it while you're doing it, or, if you're doing any fast UI changes, you don't want to be pinging your server over and over. Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
And you can also do that from JavaScript. So,
Yeah, and things like that, you probably want to leverage JavaScript more often than not. Even like I feel like out of the box, you have form validation that's just hitting the server over and over too. And you don't necessarily want to always do that either.
That's a tricky question because, yeah, one of the things I'm really into is like, well, I wouldn't say I'm like, there's a whole community around like the web as a platform and stuff like custom elements. There's people that are really into custom elements, web components, basically. And they really try to do everything like on the platform and not bring in React and whatever. There's people that are really big into that. And they tend to have a big crossover with like accessibility. And if you look at some of those people's work on HTML input validation, there's a lot of, there's been a lot of writing about accessibility issues with HTML input validation because it just doesn't give you any control over it. Like you have one style for how the validation looks, and that's basically all you get. In fact, I think in Chrome it looks like a weird like tooltip kind of pop-up thing. It looks very strange. So a lot of accessibility experts that I've seen kind of take the advice of like, just don't even use HTML input validation. Just do everything server side.
And I feel like accessibility is commonly ignored at the beginning of projects too. And it's something that is worthwhile keeping on the top of your head because you don't want to have to do it all later. And you don't want to get sued because that's a common scary story. I feel like an example that I always think of is like Shopify. They have like a lot of people won't have accessibility set up for like their checkout process, and attorneys will actually target these companies. They'll notice that they're doing pretty well and they'll go and have like a blind person or some sort of impairment try to use your checkout process, and then they sue you because they couldn't.
Right. Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Which is wild. Like it kind of sucks, but at the same time, it's good to be aware of those things.
Yeah.
That I normally use the built-in form validation with my projects, but I feel like you kind of do take a performance hit though with them, especially depending on your app distribution, right?
Yeah, and a lot of them, they're just not like, there's an email validator, but I think it's got some weird regex that isn't really that great of an option. So I don't know, like everything with HTML, the problem is just like you can't extend it. So people try really hard to make the platform work. There's actually, this is an interesting thing because I said earlier, there's this desire to never write JavaScript. Don't write JavaScript. Do everything without it. Write HTMX. Do whatever possible you can to avoid writing JavaScript. And that, if you know anything about accessibility, that should immediately be setting alarm bells off for you because so much of what's built into HTML is not accessible by default. People that don't know better act as though if you just write valid HTML, it will be accessible by default. And that's just not true. It doesn't work like that. There's so many things like the input validation that just, it's not accessible by default. If you want to be fully compliant, you do need to do it custom. So if you rely on that, like I'm just going to write valid markup and everything will be fine, it doesn't quite work out that way. So yeah.
Daniel's on and he goes, JavaScript is unavoidable, unfortunately. Which is true.
Yeah.
I find it funny, like before I started even learning LiveView, and I only started because of my YouTube channel, but I was like strictly just using Phoenix and Elixir for back-end development. And I was doing that for about 3 years, and then I started learning LiveView, and I had to write like a JS hook. and it was a struggle to remember the syntax to bring JavaScript back into my life. I had
Yeah,
to
it definitely
Google. I had
is.
to Google like, how do I do a for loop?
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean.
So I guess like when you talk about a recent thing that I've been obsessing over is website performance and like SEO and dealing with crawling and all of that stuff. And like server side rendering is an amazing like superpower when it comes to like having like your website fully crawled, and because everything is loaded immediately essentially, right? One thing that I've noticed, because I've been obsessing over like the performance and speed of things loading, once you start introducing a lot of JavaScript, your performance starts to plummet pretty quickly. What do you have any like tips for avoiding that, like lazy loading, things like that, or how do you usually handle it?
Yes. Well, first off, there are a lot of people who focus on this, who you should really follow, who are amazing. Um, a lot of them probably have more overlap with the JavaScript community, but one of them is he has a website called CSS Wizardry. Um, his name is Harry Roberts.
Okay.
He does web performance stuff, and all of his work is amazing. Going into minutia that you wouldn't even think is possible. Like he has this thing about what order should the tags in your head be in, because if you want to get as if you want to wring as much performance as possible out of the front end, each one of those things in the head, the JavaScript, CSS, the other tags, they all have different loading characteristics. Like JavaScript, it blocks the main thread as it parses by default. So you can, get around that by making it async. But
Mm-hmm.
they all have different things like that. Like CSS, it stops like the main like painting from happening. Like originally, many years ago, the way browsers would work is they didn't really care about how style sheets, whether they were on the page. Like they would load in the styles, and the site would look, unstyled, and then the style sheet would load in, and then suddenly the styles would show up. And that's no longer a thing. Now it actually blocks
Mm-hmm.
while that's loading. So, but yeah, so like just weird things like that. Like what order should those tags be in? If you go read like actual web performance blogs and stuff, there's so much amazing information out there. Um,
It's
but
wild
in
how
yeah,
much goes into it, to be honest.
Yeah, but in essence, yeah, like you know, web performance is definitely another thing that I'm really interested in. Again, has more crossover with the JavaScript community. I don't really know of any big web performance people that aren't in doing JavaScript or something like it. But the 10,000-foot view is that, yeah, your JavaScript is probably your most impactful thing. It tends to be the largest asset loaded. If you're not being careful, it can be, can get up to a megabyte, without
Mm-hmm.
even thinking, if you just add things without thinking.
Right.
So that's really what you should focus on is try to avoid loading. If you don't need a dependency, try not to add it. I guess that should be common sense. But and then
Wait a
the
second. You
way,
don't just add dependencies for fun?
yeah, yeah. And then the way that it's loaded in a new Phoenix project, there's one HTML or one JavaScript entry point, and it's loaded with async,
Mm-hmm.
which is an attribute that causes it to be loaded after the full parsing of the document. So effectively, it takes it out. It's asynchronous. It doesn't stop anything else from loading. However, what you want to be aware of is there may be things you want to load that do not, like, even if you mark a script as async, it still needs to parse the JavaScript. And before it can execute it, say you have 300 kilobytes of JavaScript, it's going to take a little bit to parse it. It's not a huge amount of time, but it's on the order of, maybe a couple milliseconds, or maybe as much as 5 milliseconds, maybe more. I don't know. Depends on how much you have. But it can be significant, and it can be way more if you have way more JavaScript. Mm-hmm. So one thing you may want to do is take dependencies that don't need to hold up connection of the socket. Because if you take a LiveView app that you just make new, one of the first things that happens in the JavaScript file is it connects the socket. If you put stuff in there say you use Sentry for error reporting, well, that's a pretty big library. So it needs to load and parse all of that. And if you put that before connecting to the socket, that's going to happen every time before the socket connects. Okay. So what's probably a better thing to do, that I don't see a whole lot of people doing, because it is somewhat of a niche optimization, but it makes a big difference, would be making 2 entry points. And this is what I do in my LiveView apps now, or at least I try to when I get to that point that I'm actually optimizing them, is I keep one that's like the critical path. So it has LiveView loading the socket and everything like that. It has all the hooks, because the hooks have to load with the socket. Mm-hmm. And then everything else that's non-critical, like loading Sentry for error reporting, or say you use some kind of analytics thing, like Google Tag Manager or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's a huge library that you definitely want to load separately. So just make a separate entry point, and I call mine async.js or non-critical.js or something like that, and just put all those things in there. And then, you can mark it to load async and just put it in its own script. And now it will no longer hold up connecting the socket while. And
then do you just have to, do you just import that after you connect to the socket, or how does that work?
Just put a separate line in your HTML, basically.
Oh, in your app, your root Heeks file.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. You can just right next to where you load index.js, I think, or app.js, maybe that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Just second line right there, you load non-critical JS.
That's a great idea. I'm about to do. See, dude, I love learning stuff. I'm about to go update my projects after this call.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. I mean, some of those libraries are quite big, and it's a non-insignificant amount of time to mount it or to parse it.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll have silly things like right now I have a lead magnet banner that pops down on my website, and there's no need for that to load in my app before the socket.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And that also, that some of that hit is there even if it's cached. Mm-hmm. Even if it's cached, it still has to parse the JavaScript. So, Yeah,
no, I love that. That's a great approach. We needed to have this conversation 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going down this rabbit hole, and I'm excited to check out Harry Roberts, because I've never been interested in web development until recently, and then I'm super OCD now about my performance and that first paint load, and I think it's important, and I think there's no reason why if you have a LiveView app, it should be one of the most responsive performant websites that you visit.
And of course, don't forget to do test monitoring and testing. The lighthouse test, I'm sure most people are somewhat familiar with.
Yeah.
Um,
I've really liked Unlighthouse because it will scan your sitemap and you don't have to do each page separately, which is really nice too.
yeah, that does look pretty interesting. I have messed around with it a little bit. Just make sure that you have, in any kind of like production scenario, you want some kind of real user monitoring data as well.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the lighthouse is like a synthetic test. It's testing how fast did it load on your computer. You also need real user data. How fast did it load out in the wild?
And do you do that with just internal analytics, or like how do you approach that?
I mean, there is like a million tools out there now. I think Sentry has a real user monitoring suite that can tell you like lighthouse scores of every page.
Okay.
I mean, there's a million of them. There's so many of
Yeah,
them.
I'm sure. Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, actually, I use this tool called Checkly. It's a really interesting product. It's like a combination of a monitoring tool, but it's also like a browser testing tool. Um, you can, well, yeah. So actually, I guess I should back up. That is a synthetic testing tool. So, um, you brought up what was it called? Unlighthouse or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That is kind of nice because you can lighthouse test a whole bunch of pages synthetically, but it's still on your computer. I mean, maybe you can host it. I don't know, but most people I've seen run it locally. What I use Checkly for is synthetic testing over the internet. So they actually spin up like a runner, and it goes and runs your test, and then it gives you the results. And you can schedule it to run every day. So it is synthetic data. It's not real user data, but it's a little more accurate synthetic data because it's going over the internet, and you
Mm-hmm.
can run it every day and look at changes over time.
I
So,
see. Versus like Unlighthouse is local host. You're spinning up your own
right.
server, and yeah, that makes sense.
And in terms of real user monitoring, I think probably like I said, there's a lot of them. I use Sentry a lot, and Sentry does have one, so that's probably the one I've used the most.
I'll have to check out Sentry. Is that with an S or a C?
With an S. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because Hired Gun Apps was written in, now I forget, I think it was Vue. It was written in Vue. No, it wasn't Vue. Anyways, I ended up writing Elixir Mentor in LiveView, right? And it was like significantly like twice as fast loading my website as HGA's site. And
Yeah.
Ben, my business partner, immediately was like pissed off. And now we rewrote HGA in LiveView.
Yeah, that is if you follow React, or I mean I say React, but if you follow the JavaScript world, which effectively means React,
Yeah.
everyone there is moving to some form of server rendering. In React, infamously, it's React Server Components, which is like a really fancy way of doing server-side rendering where each component can render individually server-side. And if you compare it to like a React SPA, like if you time traveled from 2018, where everyone's just writing React SPAs, the complexity is like off the charts of like next version 14 or whatever the one that added React Server Components is. Comparing that to like a React SPA that just ran Webpack or whatever 5 years ago, it's so much more complicated how many things, like Next is an entire framework.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to jump through those hoops because if you have a SPA there is no way to get adequate web performance from a SPA in terms of first page load, where nothing is cached. It is just always going to perform much, much worse. Once there's a cache, it's okay, it's fine. But if you're building an app where you care about SEO a lot, or you expect to have a lot of fresh visitors, and you don't want them to sit there for 3 seconds on fiber while it loads, or possibly 15 seconds on 3G while it loads, then you need to do server rendering. There's just nothing else you can do. But you have to jump through all these hoops to make it work in React. Whereas if you just choose to use something, such as Phoenix, and you just render regular HTML, you get there, a lot simpler.
Yeah. You really don't have to think about anything.
And even, I've seen a couple people come to Phoenix and they want to do like a static site, like they work on a site with a lot of content, and they want to write it in Phoenix, and they want to figure out how do I build some kind of static site generator in Phoenix. There is a couple of them out there, but I've had a couple conversations on Twitter that have amounted to, you just don't need to do that in Phoenix. Just use the templates. Like, they are so fast. The speed of loading them from disk versus just using Phoenix templates, like, honestly, is probably worse. Phoenix templates are probably faster because they get compiled into the bytecode. Like, they become Elixir functions. And if you use release, then they end up in the binary.
Yep.
There's nothing that could possibly be faster than that. Outside of like very niche scenarios where, say you do have a totally static site and you need to serve it to, tens of thousands of requests a second, then okay, yeah, I mean, Nginx is probably going to do it better because, it's been tuned to do that.
And you're just sending them an HTML. You're just sending them an HTML file at that point, right?
Right, exactly. If you just use Phoenix templates, it's so fast, it doesn't matter. You do not need to do static template compilation. If you want to do that, that's fine, but you don't need to do it for performance. Like, the templates are very fast as it is.
Yeah, it's amazing. I have no complaints. And I don't know, like, I kind of wish I had a little more front end struggle in my background. Like, I wish I dove more into React or like Svelte or all these other techs, because I feel like there's a lot of pain points when you use those technologies. And then I feel like you don't really get many of those with LiveView. But I could be naive because I'm only drinking the LiveView Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely a lot simpler. There's that popular Live Svelte project out there, and it's definitely interesting, and I haven't really gotten the chance to use it a whole lot, but mainly because I just haven't ran into a whole lot of situations where I needed a front-end framework like in my LiveView apps. And
I think it's really cool. Yeah. Wout. I think Wout is a really cool guy, and he's the one that built Live Svelte. And then Tony did a cool YouTube example. Tony Dang, he did the elevators, where he keeps local state for dropping internet connection in a LiveView app, which is pretty cool. But those are probably, that's the only example I can think of where you would really need to leverage something like Svelte.
Yeah, and I mean, it also boils down to, and also it boils down to what kind of data do you need to pass in. If you really need to just pass in one simple thing, you can just use a hook. Like some people, I've been working on this Toast library Live Toast, and it's based on a React library called Sonar or Sonar.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
It's really
And
cool. I got to check it out. You should demo it for people because I think it's a pretty impressive library.
Yeah, let me see if I can share.
I think you can share screen, and then I'll put you, full width. I think just your picture will disappear.
Okay. Let me attempt to do that. Okay, can you see my?
Yeah, I see
screen.
Your browser. Yeah, cool. So he pulled up, let's see, it is toast.src.rip. And that is his website.
But yeah, so basically it's very similar to Sonar. We can pull that up to, I mean.
Oh, wait. Oh, no. We lost you. 1 second. Uh-oh. We lost Andrew. We'll have to wait for him to rejoin. And I think he's back. There you are. We lost you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not sure why that happened, but maybe it had something to do with the screen share. But
yeah, maybe.
But yeah, you can. Yeah, it's pretty much like a drop-in thing. There's pretty good instructions there on how to do it, and it's if you want something that looks a little better than the default Flash system, because the Flash messages in Phoenix, it can be kind of annoying because they don't let you have more than one message of the same kind. So you can only have one like info message or one error message, and that's all you get, unless you reload the page. But
okay.
No,
it's cool. I was enjoying clicking around and playing with it. I think we might be having YouTube problems. Hopefully it's not affecting our stream. I just got YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming, but then my connection is fantastic, so I don't know what's going on.
Weird.
I guess we'll see what happens. Hopefully for everyone that's listening right now, we're not buffering all over the place.
Hopefully not. We can always do another stream another day too. This one doesn't turn out right.
Yeah, we'll do a redo. It always, dude, I'm always so bummed. I've had probably 3 streams where I've had really bad technical difficulties, and it's a bummer because they were such good conversations.
Yeah, that is rough. But yeah, so what I was getting at was when I built this or started working on it, I saw someone comment that they were using Sonar directly in LiveView, which is a React thing, and they just loaded it on the page, and they had a hook that just used JavaScript to send it the messages.
That's cool. Yeah. So that's what you're doing essentially?
No, there's no React or anything. It's all
okay.
LiveView.
You wrote it all in LiveView? Nice.
Yeah, but it was just kind of interesting that I guess, I see a lot of people lament the lack of a amazing turnkey component library for LiveView. Mm-hmm. Something everybody brings up, everybody wants it. They want something like Shad CN, but in LiveView.
Yeah.
But I think what's missing there is one, a lot of what's in those component libraries, not that I don't like them, I'm working on one myself, but a lot of it you can kind of make yourself in under an hour. Mm-hmm. Most components you can make one in an hour. You need just basic stuff. If you need something really special, say you need a date picker, that is infamously pretty hard to do. So that, yes, you are going to want a library for that, unless you happen to be date picker expert.
Yeah.
But that just because you need a library and you're in LiveView doesn't mean you can't just go use your favorite React date picker. If you have a JavaScript library, a React library, or whatever, that's the date picker you like, you can still use it because you still have HTML. You can still mount it to the page. You're going to have to write some hooks. You're going to have to integrate it with your app. But it doesn't mean you can't use it. You're going to have to do a little bit of work yourself to make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that like is one of the superpowers of like LiveView, just the ability to grab anything JavaScript and use it, right? Like you can have your full npm package manager, whatever you need, your node modules, and you're ready to go.
Yeah, exactly. Like that fly.io article I was talking about earlier about drag and drop. That's a good example. That's a JavaScript library that they bring in to do it. It's one hook. On the mount, it connects the library to the elements, and on update, it like fires off an event. It's not a very complicated hook. So, if you find some cool JavaScript thing you want, you can just use it.
I'm gonna have to check out that blog post. Fly.io has a lot of good posts. They write a lot of good blog posts.
They do, yeah, for sure.
I always feel like whenever I find like a really good article, it's always Fly.io. I really like their. I just closed the tab and I'm regretting this, but they wrote about the using Rust with Elixir, and it was a really good project. I think Rustler is the package, but really cool.
Yeah. But yeah, I realized also I didn't touch on the other two interop methods. We talked about client to client, but we didn't talk about server to client or client to server. So maybe I can touch upon that real quickly.
Yeah, let's do it.
So yeah, we talked about the hook. We talked about the client to client, as I call it. It doesn't use that term, but that's the JS commands. And then client or server to client is probably the simplest one conceptually, because it's just like I'm in a handle event and I need to send something to the JavaScript. That's probably like the most simple form of JavaScript interop that you can think of. And with that, the main function you're dealing with is push event, which is on phoenix.liveview, not phoenix.liveview.js. The commands are in phoenix.liveview.js. This is in LiveView itself.
Okay, yep.
But if you go to the documentation, I guess I could try to screen share again. I don't know if
yeah, let's try it. I don't think it was you. I think it's okay. I think it's YouTube, man.
Let me try one more time, and if it blows everything up, I guess I'll deal with that. Can you see my screen?
Yep, I see LiveView docs.
Yeah, so this is what I was talking about with commands. Yeah, they call them client utility commands. And yeah, basically you can think of it as client to client communication, because you write these JS functions here, and then in the markup, it serializes them into this format that LiveView.js knows how to work with, basically. And I think the push, that was that was the third one that we didn't talk about. Most of them in here are helper functions, add class, remove attribute. They're all like helpers, but the three like primitive ones are exec, which points to like an attribute that contains a command like that.
Yep.
Dispatch, which fires off an event in JavaScript. And the final one is push, which sends an event to the server. So really, you can use this to talk to the server. Not sure exactly when.
I was going to ask, is there a reason you'd want to use JavaScript to do that versus just an event handler?
Yeah, the only times that so basically I will use this occasionally actually when you're writing these like Phoenix click handlers like this, you know, they have this behavior where they look at the other elements or the other attributes of the element that start with Phoenix-value. And those things will get injected into here. I'm sure it talks about that. Yeah, like here, you got this Phoenix value room and Phoenix value limit that will get injected into the payload. But you can also, if you have something that for whatever reason you don't want to define in this syntax, if you use JS push, you can also just put whatever you want in the value payload. So it's just a different way of doing this.
That's just a map. You can pass in anything.
Yep, exactly. So, and then the other reason would be changing the target. Because if you put by default, if you put the target on here, it's going to send that message to that PID. But I think when you use push, it also allows to pass a target or something like that. Yeah. Oh yeah, target there it is. Yeah. So anyway, that's commands. And then the other thing I was talking about was on LiveView itself, the module up here. If you go to the functions, there is a push event, and this is kind of what I think of as server to client. There's a couple other little helpers like push navigate, push patch, that do some other stuff, but this is like the I guess, yeah, the primitive version, because it allows you to send any kind of event to the front end. And this also is going to be a JavaScript event. So it means you need to have add event listener to receive this. But critically,
so you would have to write that in your JavaScript file listening to your DOM, right?
Exactly. Yep. Hold on one second, if you don't mind. If you don't mind pausing, I gotta grab a different pair of headphones here.
Sure. I can put my face on for everyone instead of yours.
Okay.
No worries, man. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with YouTube. I keep getting this warning, but no one's complained, so everyone must be able to hear us just dandy. Oh, Andrew dropped off. That's all right. All right, let me look through the comments. For whatever reason, my comments are not working again, which sucks. But, oh, Chris, I will ask him if he's ever used Speed Insights. That's good. I missed DHTML, XHTML. Oh my gosh, guys. I don't even know. I mean, I know what they are, but...
Okay, back. Sorry about that.
My no, you're good.
Died in the middle of this, so I had to grab something else. But yeah, if there was any question, I could answer it. Or
yeah,
the screen share.
Chris asked. This isn't relevant to what we were just talking about, but he was curious if you've ever used Speed Insights.
Oh yeah, it's like Page Speed Insights.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that one is pretty good. I don't remember I feel like it does something on top of Lighthouse that's not just Lighthouse. Or yeah, that's the one that has all those. Or is that the Google one? Is that
Let
made
me
by
do.
Google?
I'm gonna Google because I know I've used it, but there's something
Page
I must
Speed
not have
Insight.
liked. Yeah, Page Speed Insights.
Okay, yeah, it is made by Google. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that one, from what I remember, it's pretty good. It's basically just white labeled synthetic Lighthouse from a Google server, which can be a little bit more accurate. So that's nice. There is one that I think is better, which is Web Page Test. Basically the same concept as PageSpeed Insights, but it also it has a whole bunch of extra features. Like they have this cool like experiments thing that lets you like test out changing the payload. So say you're working on your site and you want to know what happens if I made this JavaScript file defer instead of async, because there's like two different ways to make JavaScript async. Instead of making the change, you can use web page test to like change the payload on the fly, and then it will run the test again. And
Okay.
it's kind of neat, but you got to pay for it. But
Okay. Well, sometimes good tools you gotta cough it up, right?
that's true. That's true. Yeah. And
I feel
then
like developers hate paid tools though.
yeah. And then the other thing I was going to say is Page Speed Insights, and I think maybe Web Page Test as well. They offer the ability to look at the crux data, which don't remember off the top of my head what it stands for at all, but it's basically Google's, like, they maintain a like a global database of like every site they crawl, and like how well it or how fast it loaded and stuff like that.
Compared to everyone else.
Yeah, it's like it's dumped into a giant BigQuery database,
Okay.
Google BigQuery. So you can, if you make a Google Cloud account, you can query the Crux database, not for free, but you get like a certain amount of queries for free or something like that. But,
Okay, nice.
But so that kind of gets you real world data,
Oh, someone said browser stack is good for testing.
Yeah, I think they do have some web performance stuff now as well.
And I know that you mentioned you wanted to talk about TypeScript, and we actually have a question about it too. So that might be a good like little lead into it. So Toxteeth, I think is how I would say his name. Sorry, I probably butchered whatever your name is. Sorry, dude. But he asked, how do you feel about using TypeScript still, and have you changed your mind since your video?
Well, in my video, I basically said there's no reason not to use it. Like, if you're not using it, you're basically losing out on free type checking. And yeah, I still think that. I was talking to someone the other day that was asking like, how hard is it to add TypeScript to a new LiveView project? And it really, like, could not be simpler. There's like basically nothing you have to do. You can look at that video, but basically all you need to do is you change the file from .js to .ts, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Then you need to go into the config, config/dev or whichever one. One of them has the configuration for ESBuild. So you got to go to the line where ESBuild is configured, and you'll see there it has index.js. So you just need to go change that to .ts.
Nice.
And then
I
you're
need to
done.
check out that video. I'd much rather. Type safety, guys, lifesaver.
That's literally all you need to do. And that guy I was talking to on Twitter, actually, he said like, oh, he was gonna make a PR to add like a TypeScript option to the generator.
That'd be awesome.
And when he said that, I was like, God, why didn't I think of that? That would have been that would have been an amazing PR. But now I don't want to take it because it was his idea. But
you'd be worshipped forever.
Yeah, it is just, it's so simple. It's the kind of thing that it would be really nice to have in the generator because,
yeah,
I mean, it takes 2 seconds to do, but I mean, if it just does it for you, that would be nice.
Well, I'm going to go watch your video, and then I'm probably going to change all my projects I'm working on right now because I'd much rather have TypeScript than just JavaScript.
Yeah, and then, there is a little bit more to it than that I get in the video. For instance, if you don't have a TS config, there is a default, like set of default values. So if you don't make one, you'll get the defaults. And the defaults are actually pretty good. Like in a lot of cases, you can kind of get by without one if you don't want to have one, but you probably want a TS config because you're going to want to configure things. So
yeah, for sure.
I go into that in that video. And then the other thing is like doing the type checking itself. There's no the LiveView JS library does not export types. At least it doesn't right now. I mean, there's been some people talking about doing it, so maybe they have done it in the near future or something. But as of very recently, the types are not included. They're included in a separate repo that's called definitely typed. Okay. And that's like, if you've written much TypeScript, you've probably seen it before. It's like a repo where people put, if they don't want to export types with their library, they can make a new repo in definitely typed that's like, these are the types for Express, or these are the types for Phoenix LiveView. The reason that it's kind of weird, like today, I think it really doesn't need to be there anymore because so many people just write TypeScript and just export their TypeScript types. But back in the day, TypeScript wasn't as widely used. So if you had a library where you wanted TypeScript types, but the maintainer didn't like TypeScript, so he didn't write them, you could actually submit a PR to definitely typed for the creator of that library, and then there'd be types even though the creator doesn't like TypeScript. It's kind of why it exists.
Also, if you want to know what Crux is, it's Chrome user experience.
There we go, Chrome user experience. Yes. But yeah, so you got to add the types from definitely typed. But once you do that, you can add them to your JavaScript. And really the only one that's comes up, unless you're using channels. If you're using channels, there's a whole bunch of types related to channels, and those are helpful. But if you're not using channels, the only one that really comes up a lot is the view hook. That's the type that the name of the type for JavaScript hooks. And that one is helpful because you can, if you can use that to type check your hooks basically and make sure that, say you're writing a hook and instead of typing out mounted, you type mount, let's say you leave off the ED. If you don't use TypeScript, you would never know until you go to test the app. But if you do use TypeScript, it would tell you. Yeah. So.
Yeah. It's the little things, man.
Exactly.
Quality of life.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. All right. Let's see. Is there anything else you wanted to cover today?
Well, we talked about I kind of touched on the client to server, server to client, that push event. It pushes an actual JavaScript event. The only other notable thing to say about that is you can define an event listener with add event listener to receive that event, but also hooks come with an extra mechanism to also receive like events. They can call add event listener for you. If you go to the page on JavaScript interoperability in the LiveView docs, that's the one where they really talk about the client to server stuff. And it's kind of tricky because the functions they talk about in there are JavaScript functions, whereas all the others are Elixir. Even the commands, even though they are JavaScript, they end up running JavaScript.
Right.
They are written in Elixir. So those all are easy to document in Xdoc. The JavaScript side ones are not so easy to document in Xdoc. So unfortunately, they're just kind of, dumped into a big list.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and
yeah, so that it's kind of confusing because they're not documented the same way. You get nice Elixir functions, but that push event is like that's the other side. So you've got a push event on the server. You can do socket or push event and pass the socket to it. And then you also have push event on the client. If you're in a hook, you can call this dot push event, and by doing that, you can push an event back to the server that would call a handle event. And then there's also push event 2 that lets you send to a different PID. If you have like live components on the page, then you have to care about which PID it is. But then there's that handle event function that's briefly talked about on the JavaScript interoperability page. And that basically, behind the scenes, it calls window.addEventListener. So it's really just like a helper around window.addEventListener. But sometimes that can be helpful if you need to do a lot of that server to client calling. Sometimes you might want to use that hook to define the handler.
Yeah, I feel like that's just a cleaner, happier way to do it.
And then, the hooks get talked about in there. Obviously, if you've used the hooks at all, you have to, they have to have an ID. So that's one thing. You have to make sure you have a unique ID on them when you add them in. But
I will say at least the LS or the Elixir language server is really good at giving you those warnings.
Yeah. But other than that, they you can do so many manner of things with them. With the mounted callback, you can do a whole bunch of stuff. Like if you need to load a JavaScript library, like that drag and drop thing we were talking about, you could do that in mounted and load some
versus
JavaScript
just loading it on your initial load kind of thing. Yeah, that's a smart move.
Yeah. See, this is the thing. Sometimes I've seen people do this where they'll take a library like that needs a DOM element, and they'll just put it in their regular index.js, and they'll throw like on page load, look for this element and add this event listener, or do something to this element. The problem with that is if the element doesn't exist when the page is created, then that breaks.
Yeah.
So that's the nice thing about the hooks. You put it in mounted, if that element changes later on and then it becomes visible on page, then the mounted will fire. So that can be, in my experience, it's a lot more resilient than relying on the page load and just hoping that the element is there. It
also probably helps performance a lot too, because you're only calling it when you need it.
That's a good point. Yeah, that too. And then there's also a whole series of kind of tricks that you can get around with update, the updated callback in the hooks. Particularly, one that's pretty neat is, let me see if I can find an example here. If you have a case of like, this is one that I was working on recently. If you put a text area in a LiveView form, they get that handle that you can drag so the user can make the text area bigger.
Mm-hmm.
That's really nice, but the problem with that is if LiveView triggers a re-render, the height goes back to what it was originally. So the user might type in there, drag the thing bigger, type some more, and then go and type in another input, and then suddenly it snaps to a smaller size.
It's super annoying.
It's super annoying, yeah. And there is like a 5-line hook that can make it go away. That is like super simple. I can send it to you on Twitter, and you can put it in the show notes or something. But
yeah, I'll definitely do that.
It's basically just you have a before update, and in the before update, you check the current height of the element, you save that into a variable, and then in the update, you read that back out and you set it back to the height.
That's smart.
So that before update fires before the update, and the update fires after. So what it allows you to do is you normally data gets destroyed in the DOM diffing that LiveView does. If you set an attribute and LiveView re-renders that attribute's gone, because it's diffing everything.
Mm-hmm.
But this allows you to maintain state in an element between diffing. And that is really, really powerful. And I don't see a whole lot of people doing that. A lot of times when they run into an issue with DOM diffing, they'll just put Phoenix update ignore on it. And that basically takes the element out of DOM diffing. So it'll render once and then it's done. It's static for the rest of the page. And sometimes that works fine. But if it's just one thing that you care about, like one attribute, and you need that attribute to stick around through re-renders, you can just use that trick, write it to a variable on before update and then write it back to the element.
I like that. So, that's cool. Yeah, definitely send that over to me and I'll add it to the description. Because if anyone's ever used like a text area and then when it re-renders, because it'll snap back to the tiniest form ever.
Yeah, it's really annoying. It's the kind of thing that, it'd be, in some ways, I could see it would be nice if LiveView had some of those quality of life things just like built in, because it does have some things like that. There's some things that it does with forms that are non-standard, like it adds like that method that you can add, or that method that you can, I think that's non-standard, right? Because normally forms can only be a post, and the method allows you to make them a put or something like that, I think.
I
don't know. There's some things like that are non-standard.
Yeah.
And it would be nice to have certain things like that. Like if text areas just didn't do that out of the box, that would be nice. But it's hard to know, like, where do you draw the line on that? Like, if you go down that road, you could be adding stuff for a long time that are non-standard, that the user could be doing themselves, or the developer could be doing themselves. So it's hard to know where to draw the line on it. For sure. You can't make everyone happy either. No, and the other thing I was going to say too, we were talking about, you brought up the performance question with live views. Obviously, I was going to say earlier, the performance characteristics of the common JavaScript apps is very well understood at this point. Like it's understood how to optimize spas or optimize, React server components, server-side rendering, JavaScript, whatever. And same thing with regular HTML, like a Rails app, or old Phoenix apps or whatever. They're just returning HTML. I think that everybody knows how to, or not everybody, but it's understood how you go about optimizing those websites. But LiveView is like something totally different. And I don't think it's really fully understood yet how exactly to optimize it to like an extreme degree. If you're serving millions of people with LiveView, how exactly you go about optimizing that, I'm not sure if anyone has really fully figured it out yet. And it's just a matter of time, as it becomes more popular. I think the patterns will get more and more understood. But I will say the biggest thing to watch or to like look out for is probably the delay in rendering of the socket itself. So for instance, if you have you can kind of see this yourself. If you have a Phoenix LiveView site that if it gets too big, like you've got, there's at least one site I worked on in the past that it was just a very large Phoenix project. So it wasn't the fastest website in the world. And the delay in the socket actually connecting was like noticeable. Like it, even on locally, it could be like a full second, just because it was an older app. And that is like that has performance implications that are not easy to deal with and not well understood. Like if you load a LiveView site and it relies on, whatever LiveView features to click a button to make a form call something or do whatever, or open a modal, or, well, opening a modal is a bad example because you can do that with JavaScript. But if it does something that it relies on the server with, you're totally locked out from that interaction while the JavaScript is loading, because it has to download all the JavaScript, parse it, and then it has to connect, which means it needs to make an HTTP call. It needs to switch over to a WebSocket. Then it needs to send the connect message over the WebSocket to initiate. And then it needs to mount the LiveView, which is a whole nother render. So if that process takes, 2 seconds because you are on a train or a plane and you're on bad internet, and you try to like click a button during that 2 seconds, it's not going to work. And I think that is the biggest performance implication. And there's not really good answers to it other than you need to, like what I said earlier about the critical, like there's this term that they use in, if you read people like the CSS wizard guy, there's this term in web performance called like the critical path. And really, I think one of the only options you have is just making sure that that critical path is as small as possible. You're not loading a whole bunch of JavaScript, because that can be a really big problem if your app sits there for a second while it tries to connect to the socket and someone clicks a button and nothing happens.
Yeah,
they're gonna be really confused.
Right. Yeah, well, and that's when, your user experience plummets. People think your app is broken and you no longer have a responsive, awesome, real-time LiveView app.
Yeah, and now I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I remember there being some JavaScript framework that had something where they sent server-side rendered, maybe it was SvelteKit. I think it might have been SvelteKit, but don't quote me on that. I might be misremembering, but I think it in the SSR implementation, it sent server rendered HTML, and then as the bundle loaded, which could take a significant amount of time, it had a little bit of JavaScript that still listened for page interactions like clicks, and then it could actually replay them once the bundle finished loading. And that is something that I think LiveView could do, and I don't fully know if it should do it or not, because again, it's hard to know where to draw the line. Like, how many interactions do you allow to replay? How much of a delay do you allow to happen there? Like, if the page takes 10 seconds to load, do you replay the
Right, because
click
at that
event?
point, you probably abandoned things and thought it broke, right? So do you really want the clicks to still happen in 10 seconds?
Right. See, it's tricky, but I think what would be nice at some point if it could replay events up to a certain amount of time. Say, like, the first couple seconds, if you click something before the socket has mounted, that click would then be replayed, and what you tried to do will still work.
Yeah.
That
No,
would be nice.
I think there'd
Yeah.
definitely be some good use case for that.
Yes, it would be nice, but it is a niche thing. There is ways around it, which is just make sure your socket is mounting as fast as you can make it mount. Also, the other thing I'll say is, like, there's like some very niche things, like LiveView, the back forward cache doesn't exactly work because you have a WebSocket, and the back forward cache is like the thing that allows the browser to load previous pages out of memory rather than go request them all again. So that doesn't work. When you have a WebSocket, the BF cache is just turned off.
Right.
There is I know there's one guy that's a LiveView contributor that's working on it. His name is Stefan or something. I've seen that I'm pretty sure he is working on that. I have no idea what the status of that is, but it is theoretically possible to have a listener for page navigation, and when a navigation starts, like, unmount the socket, so that when the navigation actually happens, the socket is not mounted, so therefore the page will be loaded into the BF cache. So then when you do hit back, it will become loaded from the BF cache. It would be nice, but it's also very niche, because it's like, it only really matters on dead view to live view navigations, like going forward to a dead view and then hitting the back button. That could theoretically load out of memory, but that's like a very it's probably not a super important optimization to make, I guess.
Right. It would be nice, though.
It would be nice. Yeah, there's little things like that. And then the other thing, just on performance, the default, like, JavaScript asset handling out of the box is pretty good. The ES build configuration, I think, makes sense. ES build minifies stuff out of the box, which obviously you want to do, and everything is set up to gzip out of the box, as far as I know. Yeah, pretty sure ES build gzips out of the box.
I think so, yeah.
However, if you are, like, really want to, like, push it to the limit, you can get a little extra out of than what's just the default. There are a couple minifiers that are a little more, can get like a little bit smaller payload. There's one for CSS called Lightning CSS that can give you CSS that's slightly smaller than what ES Build can do. So if you have a really big CSS for some reason, that's something you can consider. Same thing with JavaScript. There's a couple minifiers that are a little bit smaller than what ESBuild can do, but they are usually slower. But the big one would be compression. You really, really need to be serving your assets with Brotli. It's an incredibly amount of smaller. I mean, it's just insane how small Brotli compression can make files. And what I do is I just serve everything with Cloudflare, and Cloudflare has built-in Brotli compression. So you can have it just compress your assets on the fly, more or less, but then it writes them into a cache, so it doesn't have to do it every time.
Yeah,
but that's
nice.
what I do. If you're not using Cloudflare, you have to do it yourself, though. You're going to have to, if you look it up, there's a way that you can run a different compressor other than gzip, and there's a package that somebody made for doing it with Brotli. You'll have to add that in and then generate your own Brotli files. If you're serving those assets yourself and not using Cloudflare. That is, without a doubt, the single most important thing. If you are not doing it right now and you want the site to be faster, that will probably have a bigger impact than anything else.
Yeah, for sure. It's always image size. And another ding that you'll get on all those reports, right, is if you use like auto height or auto width at all, because then it has to run computation on your mobile device or your browser, whatever it may be doing, right?
Is that for
like it's better to serve the exact ratioed size image
right.
to the screen size it's serving.
Right. Yeah. If you have a site that's got a lot of images, obviously you're going to need to optimize them. There is a lot of products like Cloudflare also, they have an image.
And I believe you can send in like width and height of what you want the image to be served to you as, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can use the Cloudflare one. I think Vercel maybe has one that you can use. And then there's also one that's it's called like Docker.
There's some really nice like CDN products out there too that will do it for you.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of one. If I think of it, I'll send it to you. But it's there's one I've used in the past that's like a Go package. That it's like an on-the-fly image resizer that runs in a Docker container, and you run it as like a proxy. So like you send it requests with the path to the asset, and you give it a desired size, and then it will do the resizing, and then it will cache the resized version. And the cache is configurable. You can have it cached to disk. You can have it cached to an S3 bucket. You can configure how you want it to happen.
Okay.
And that way, if you don't want to mess around with like resizing images, you could just put the large version out there and use that to resize it as you go.
That's nice. Well, I will say images are the biggest pain in the butt to deal with.
It is. It can be a lot of work, so that can be nice. And I also used it on a site where I was building an RSS reader, and so it loaded a lot of third-party images, and that's a tricky one because your own images you can just resize them and host them wherever you want. But if you need to load someone else's images and hotlink to them, if they suddenly send you an image that's 10 megabytes, there's nothing you can do. Like your user just has to sit there loading 10 megabytes.
Like my podcast LiveView, I'm just hitting, my RSS feed. Those images are always the slowest to load on my entire site. Yeah.
Well, so this, I used it for this purpose because it's a proxy. So you can point it to any image on the internet. So
that's awesome.
Proxied the third-party images because it was an RSS reader. So the images were like Open Graph pictures, or RSS itself has an image attribute. So it didn't matter how big they were. My app would just resize them to nice little previews, and it
Yeah,
would
that's
catch them.
awesome.
So it was really fast. So yeah, if I think about that, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, send that to me because I actually want to use it. That sounds awesome.
And the other one I've been using for my own sites when I do want to like manage the content has been ImageKit, IMGKIT.
Oh, yeah. I was actually I haven't used it, but I was just in their docs because I was considering it.
I like it.
They're a CDN essentially, right?
Right, it's a CDN.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good one. They have a generous free tier. So, I like it. I will say the one like unsolved problem I feel like, and actually I think I saw an Elixir project for this recently, so maybe it's been solved. But for me anyways, making content sites, the thing that's annoyed me the most is open graph previews. If you've seen like Next.js on Vercel, there's like a package that everybody uses to make nice open graph previews, and everybody just copy and paste that in, and then it works great. And Elixir, I haven't seen that, but like I said, I think there is someone that made one that basically just took what Vercel does and turned it into an Elixir thing. But yeah, it's I would really like a way to not have to ever make another open graph preview in Photoshop ever again, because I hate doing that.
I hear you. I don't think I've ever done it, but I can understand the pain.
It's like those social media preview images, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I know what you mean. I just haven't dealt with it.
Yeah.
Or I've ignored the problem.
Well, they look so much better if you have the nice picture, you know?
For sure. 100%.
But yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, we've been going for a while. If anyone has questions for Andrew, send them our way right now. Other than that, if we don't, we're going to wrap this up. And Andrew, you're always welcome to reach out and come back on because it's always good conversation.
Yeah, definitely. We need to do another one, you know?
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
I need to keep doing it because I feel like I learned so much from you. My noob front end developer self needs to learn more.
Yeah, it's a good it's a nice opportunity to just when I'm doing like for companies, like doing interviews in the past, I love just getting into a conversation with people, you know? Like I feel like doing like tech challenges or like leak code challenges and that kind of thing, it's just like a total waste of time because
I agree.
Everything you need, you can just have a conversation with somebody.
Yep. Well, the worst part is I feel like it puts unneeded pressure on the interviewee, right? And it's just a weird dynamic. I think technical interviews kind of suck. Like I'm horrible at doing a technical interview because I freaking panic. Like I'd much rather talk about projects. Like if you want to know if a developer knows what they're doing, ask them to pull up a project that they've recently worked on and then talk about it. And
I know.
You'll learn everything you need to know.
And the leak code style, I think, is just a big waste of time. Like,
yeah. Well, the problem is you have all the FANG companies. They jump on things like that, and then everyone thinks they have to do it.
Yeah, I've never worked for a company like that, so I'm just totally speculating. But I also wonder how much of it is just the people doing the hiring are not very good at assessing.
Yeah.
And so you need to have a metric that is at least objective, even if it's not good, because then at least you're not falling back on, does the hiring manager know what he's talking about?
Yeah. I think, you have good conversation, you have technical conversations and a small practice project, and then have them talk through it. Like, why did they solve something this way? And you know what? Hire them. If they don't work out, fire them quick.
Yeah.
like, that's like, you got to get them working to actually know if they're a capable engineer.
Yeah, and we are in a weird atmosphere right now. I think we talked about this last time I was on, which was
Yeah,
like,
and it's gotten weirder, dude.
it's gotten weirder. Yeah, I know. Crazy.
Dude, the tech space is weird, and it's a hard space to be in right now, especially if you're in the job market.
Yeah, I feel bad for anyone that's job hunting right now because, yeah, it does not look good. I don't know when it's going to bounce back, but yeah.
I saw a funny like Primogen thing about AI, and like he was talking about how like everyone's using AI to code, and he's like, here's what I think's going to happen. If we keep using this, we're going to keep getting this mediocre crap code in our projects, and then they're going to have to hire good engineers again to fix the AI problem.
I do agree with that. I
Yeah.
have seen a lot of that of like, I do use AI myself, but like, I feel like I know how to work with what it gives you to,
You have to be able to
yeah,
smell. You have to have bad code smell. And if you
yes,
can't, if you don't have that ability, you should not be using AI. Because like I'll use it for
yes,
very small things. Like obviously I'm not going to ask it to write a project for me, but I'll ask it to like sometimes sort some data for me. And
yes.
you'll see what it spits out and be like, I don't think that's quite right. And at least you can like work with it from there. But you need the ability to, smell out that nasty code.
Yeah, the other thing it's really good at is like parsing. Like something I'll do a lot of is like I have a query in SQL and I want to have it in Ecto. And if you asking ChatGPT that kind of thing, it does great because you give it data structured in one way, you tell it you want it structured another way,
Mm-hmm.
it can do that all day. You're not
Yep.
asking it to, explain philosophy to you or anything. It's just language processing,
Yep.
which it's amazing at.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
but yeah, exactly. I think it is definitely like a trap of like, I've seen it myself of like, engineers at every level of from beginner to not. Um, if you don't know, like, if you don't know how to know when it's giving you BS answer back, it can be dangerous.
Exactly. And you guys have to remember Stack Overflow is a major contributor to the large language model.
Yeah,
And that tells you a lot right there.
and also I think it's gotten better too. With I noticed probably around the beginning of the year when I would use ChatGPT with Elixir, it wasn't that great. Like it would make syntax mistakes a lot,
Mm-hmm.
where it wouldn't make those mistakes with like JavaScript. But now I found it's a lot better. It doesn't make as many Elixir mistakes, even though it's a much more uncommon language.
Yeah.
So it's definitely getting easier to write Elixir with AI, but it still struggles with it a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like if you're writing like an Nginx config file,
Yeah.
like ChatGPT or like, Cloud or Claude, whatever you're using, you'll probably get a really great config file or like a Docker compose file or even a Docker file. Like you'll get good stuff out of those with ChatGPT.
The other thing it does really well, rather than asking it like, here's my problem, write me a whole module to do that. One thing it does really well is taking like data manipulation problems and writing that function for you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you like have a list with data that looks a certain way, and you tell it like, hey, I need a function that will group this by this, and then group inside of that by this, and then I need to sort by this,
Mm-hmm.
it can spit that out amazing.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, it does really well at that. It doesn't do so well at giving it like, you know, I don't know, like if it when the task, especially if you can give it an example of the expected input and the expected output, it tends to do really well at that.
Basically, the smaller you can break a task into, the better response you're going to get.
Yeah. And also the other thing it does pretty good at is like it's consumed enough tailwind that you can often get pretty good looking components just by asking it like make this look like a button,
Yeah,
and it'll, you know, give you a list of tailwind classes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little dangerous if you don't know CSS, but yeah, it can sometimes get you a little bit farther.
I had a really nasty Heeks file once where my Tailwind classes were all over the place, and it was like just like a small home page. So I threw it in ChatGPT and I was like, "Can you refactor
Yeah.
all my Tailwind classes?" Because I knew I had like ones that weren't doing anything or overriding other things, and it actually did a really good job.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good at stuff like that. Sometimes I've done like I have like a function that's just like gotten ridiculously long, and I'll paste it in and ask it like break this into 3 functions,
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that you could do yourself. It's just it can do it so much faster, and it doesn't tend to make mistakes at that kind of
Yeah.
task. It does it pretty well, and that's how you really should use it. And when I use it in that manner, I feel like I'm getting just a huge productivity boost, because it would take me an hour to sit there and figure out how exactly to break this up.
Yeah, I recently I'm building like an internal tool for HGA, and it's basically like a multi-tenant platform, but on the root level, I have organizations, right? And I have like root domains and then subdomains. And I wrote a script to constantly get my certbot, my SSL certs, but I didn't like my subdomains are just the subdomain before the dot, or yeah, before the dot. And I was like, okay, I need to have my root domain and then each case of a subdomain with my root domain I just need a list of strings, and it spit out an awesome answer for me.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can write like doc tests too, like sometimes you can write the doc test first and then ask AI to write the function. And that can
Oh
be pretty
yeah,
good.
that's a great idea.
Yeah. Yeah, and sorry, just totally off topic, but one thing, I know we've been going for a while, but I was kind of curious. Maybe we can discuss a different time. I don't know, but I've had multiple people ask me about like total beginner resources in Elixir. And I'm kind of curious for you and your channel. I know you've been making some content that's geared towards like Elixir fundamentals. I never know like what else is out there to recommend people. Like people,
Yeah, I
you know.
think I was actually just talking with Peter Ulrich about this. And like I have a playlist of like basics, like Elixir fundamentals, right? And then I have a course that I sell as well where you start with the fundamentals and we slowly go to like OTP and gen server stuff. And I know like there's like Udemy courses for like $10. I forget his name, Greicher or whatever. He makes a lot of good like web stuff. So there's stuff like that. I almost feel like I don't know. I don't know if he's a troll or not, but he's on Twitter and he's very like filterless, and he just like started like throwing shade because I announced like a 4th of July sale on my course, and he's like, yeah, I'd buy this if it wasn't just another basic Elixir course out there. I was like, is there really that many basic courses? Like I don't know if there are. There's
I
like a
don't know.
handful that I know of.
I haven't really seen a whole lot of them. That's why I didn't know what to recommend to people.
You know who's really good is Pragmatic Studio.
Yeah, I've heard people
Their
say
their
that.
LiveView course is really good.
I
Yeah,
haven't.
Stefan Grider or whatever his name is, I forget. But someone just said his course is outdated, and it's the only one on Udemy. But so like this guy was throwing shade. He's like, "Why would I buy your course? It's way too expensive. I can go to Udemy for $10." And I was
So
like, "Yeah,
what?
you could, but at the same time, like I bring people into my Discord community and private channels, and I don't really want people that are only willing to spend $10 in there. Like I
Is that
want
the common price on Udemy? Is it like
Yeah,
cheap
Udemy is like
courses?
super high discount. They'll pretend it's a $200 course and it'll
Huh,
always be for sale for like
interesting.
90% off, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know a whole lot about what those popular ones are, but I mean, I've seen the Pragmatic Studio one. I haven't watched it myself,
They're really
and
good. I think their humor is hard to get through, but like their fundamentals and their delivery of like hard content with diagrams and stuff is really well done.
yeah, and I've had a couple books that I think are pretty good, but I just don't know if people learn that way anymore. I don't
Some
know. That's a
people
good.
like I think I'm lucky because I learn through reading and documentation, and like I almost don't have the patience to watch a video.
Yeah,
Like I'll watch videos for very specific things if I find it, but it's hard for me to like want to sit through and learn that way necessarily. Like I enjoy teaching that way. Like I don't want to write a book, but I'll record a video. But yeah, I don't know.
yeah, and also the like non-video courses. I think there's one that's like elixirschool.com or something.
Oh yeah, I've checked that. I think I've like browsed through it.
I don't know if that's an official thing though.
Is it kind of like what is the one where it's like multiple languages and tracks and you can do like little leak code challenges?
I don't know.
Oh man, my brain doesn't work
Um,
when I'm on put on the spot.
oh, are you,
Apparently, no, go
that's
ahead.
what is it called? Exorcism,
Yeah, yeah, exorcism,
something
oh,
like that. Or there was
exor
one called Code Wars, but I think they went out of business.
exorcism is what I was thinking of.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
And like I feel like that stuff is fun, right? When you're like trying to learn syntax and you're really new, but I don't think you really learn how to build a project that way.
Yeah, I've struggled with this from like two angles when talking to people that are like totally want to begin, of like a just what content to recommend them, because there's just not very much of it. But then B, it's because Elixir is so different in terms of like the state management model. You know, it's not like you can just go write a Python script that increments a number or whatever, and that's your learning thing. You know, you kind of, if you want to write that program, you're going to need to understand like some pretty deep OTP concepts before you can actually make
Hmm.
that work.
Yeah,
So
for
it's
sure.
it's unlike learning any other thing, any other language. So it's hard to recommend where people start. Like, do you tell
Yeah.
people to start with Phoenix? Do you tell them to start with OTP?
I think I think my basics playlist is really good. It's cringy. It's hard for me to watch because it was like the first content I ever made, but I feel like I did a good job delivering like core concepts. And then I slowly build into like using the IDE and then like kind of like creating modules and things. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
Hmm.
I'm a little biased. Like obviously go to Elixir Mentor on YouTube.
Yes, you should. Yeah, if you are learning, you should definitely check that out. But yeah, there's just it's just hard to know where to, because if you tell people to start with OTP, that is a good fundamental thing to have, but you're going to be in the weeds.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't think you need OTP though to start. Like I think you can even start building an Elixir project and not even understand that concept.
and focus on web,
You
just
focus, yeah, yeah. And then like slowly when you run into use cases where you actually need to understand those things, you can add them, but it's not like an all at once overflow of information, you know? Because I think the mistake is you jump in and like you're excited about gen servers and then you start using them for all the wrong reasons. Like you get used to, like you start using it as like a global state versus what they should actually be used for, you know?
That's a good point. Yeah. I feel like the perfect introduction would have some level of like, obviously you need to talk bare fundamentals like syntax and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and an overview, but then going directly into web stuff. But well, actually, maybe I think it's valuable to early on try to introduce people to just, they need to have the base level concept of the actor model and processes in
Mm-hmm.
Erlang, but then just moving directly from that into something like Phoenix, and then coming back around to OTP stuff.
Yeah, no, I
Probably
agree. I
better.
think that's a good like trip to go on.
Yeah. But I'm not sure there's anything out there that's a lot of information. So I don't think there's anything out there that is really going to outline that from like beginning to end. It is a
Yeah.
long journey, but
Well, so like
yeah.
my course on indie courses, I start like with basics like data types and then slowly step up through like pattern matching, creating functions, modules, and then I get into processes and tasks and gen servers and supervisors.
Now that's the one on the
Peter Ehrlich's
yeah,
indie courses, yeah.
right. Okay, I have to check that out. I haven't. I mean, I've looked at his website a little bit, but I hadn't seen that course that you're talking about there. I'll have to
Yeah,
check that
it's
out.
you'll see me on the thumbnail and it's called a comprehensive introduction.
Yeah, that would be. I'll have to take a look at that. Yeah, but
Elixir can
I
be
just thought it was
trained.
interesting because it's it can be difficult to try to help people.
Yeah. You know,
on this.
honestly, my gist clone would be a good place to start too, because I jump right
Yeah.
into LiveView and then introduce I like slightly talk about life cycle and stuff, but not to a degree where it's confusing. So like
Yeah,
enough
yeah.
to build a feature at a time and then walk through, you know?
Yeah, that's because that is something when I have spoken with people that are like very fresh beginning, they'll like consume content on maybe LiveView and maybe a little bit of stuff about gen servers, and they'll be totally unsure. Like they'll have a thing they want to build, and this is actually something that I think is very common to all beginners, or not necessarily beginners, but just people learning that language. They have an idea in their head of what they want to make, but they have no clue how to fit the pieces
They
together
don't know how to
to
connect
do
the
it.
dots. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, because you learn everything in a silo and be like, okay,
Yes.
great. So now how do I make my project?
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah. That's
I've been brainstorming. I don't know how to deliver it yet, so I haven't really made announcements or promises yet. But I think it'd be really cool to create, like, kind of off the Elixir Mentor brand, like building and launching a successful MVP, and you
yeah.
give
That would be.
everyone the tools to build their project, right? And then you're kind of the mentor level. You do live streams every week with them, a couple one-on-ones, and you have this like inner circle of entrepreneurial people with dev skills that might not be strong enough to build their MVP, but you get them there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting concept. I feel like something like that would be, helpful and
I
do
think it
really
could be
well.
cool. But then like the pricing structure is hard. What is too much, and like you like, cuz I only have so much time in my day. I'd love to be able to help people for free all day long,
Yeah.
but at some point you can only be so available, right?
And that's another interesting thing too. Is like, you know, oftentimes it is really hard to help people that are just totally beginning because they don't even know the right questions to ask. once they get to the point where they are asking questions, then someone that can step in and answer them can be really helpful. But before they're to that point, it's very difficult to converse about it, because it's just like, well, I want to do this. And it's like, well, what have you tried to do so far? Like, I'm not sure where to start unpacking that.
Yeah, Daweezy in the comments, he's like, if I was building a SaaS product, I would love that service. And he goes, it's niche, but great for solo dev entrepreneurs. Like, absolutely. And I think that's like Phoenix LiveView is amazing for that point, right? Because you can be a solo dev and build like a fantastic platform alone and iterate pretty quickly.
Yeah, actually, I think it's like PHP or Laravel. It seems like it's kind of, well, that and Next.js. They got these big followings on like build in public. So many people using Laravel and Next. But I mean, LiveView obviously is a fraction of the size, but I think it could get you a lot farther, you know.
Yeah. No, I agree. So yeah, that's like an idea I've been like tinkering around in my head. I just want to, when I announce it or deliver the product, I want it to be awesome, and I want it to be super beneficial. Because like, how cool would it be like 5 years from now to know you just like helped 20 people launch awesome tech companies?
One of the things that I've had on my to-do list that I have no idea when it's going to happen, it'll happen someday, but has been like a LiveView starter kit. You know, that's really popular in Next and Laravel. There's someone out there.
Like a generator that just creates a more put together project for you to start with, or how would it work?
It's kind of like what Pedal Pro is.
Okay.
You know, but just, I don't like Alpine, so I'm not the target demographic for that. But basically Pedal Pro without the Alpine, I guess.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like the pedal stack without the A.
Exactly. Yeah, you know, I just think you can get around it. You don't need it anymore. With the JS commands is really the thing. That wasn't there.
When were JS commands introduced?
I feel like it was like LiveView 0.17.
Okay, because I feel like that's when I got into it after, because I never understood. I was like, I don't get why Alpine is used, and I never could wrap my head around it.
Yeah, I think it was around there.
That makes sense.
And yeah.
All right. Well, Andrew, I think we just got to do this again, because we're hitting like 2 hours. Well, this is like a Joe Rogan episode.
Yeah. Yes.
A nerdy version.
Yes.
No, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on. It's always fun. Stay in touch, and thank you everyone for hanging out and chatting with us. It's been a lot of fun. Hope you all have a good weekend. Peace out.